My daughter-in-law banned me from Christmas and my son agreed how I gave the perfect payback without changing anything. I never thought I would become the kind of woman who destroys families at baby showers, but there I was, watching my daughter-in-law Emily unwrap the USB drive that would ruin her life, smiling sweetly as if I had just given her the most thoughtful gift in the world. The morning everything changed started like any other December day in my small suburban home in Ohio. I was preparing my famous cranberry sauce recipe, the same one David had loved since he was 7 years old. Christmas was only 3 weeks away, and I had already wrapped his favorite sweater and picked out the perfect ornament for Emily. After 5 years of marriage, I thought I finally understood my daughter-in-law. I thought we had found our rhythm. I was seasoning the sauce when my phone rang. David's number flashed on the screen, and my heart did that little flutter it always did when my only child called. At 65, I still felt that maternal joy whenever I heard his voice. The conversation started normally enough. We talked about the weather, his work at the accounting firm, my retirement from teaching. Then he cleared his throat in that way that meant something difficult was coming. Margaret, we need to talk about Christmas this year. I set down my wooden spoon, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the December air seeping through my kitchen windows. Emily and I have been discussing it, and we think it would be better if you didn't join us this year. We want to start some new traditions, just the two of us. You understand, right? The words hit me like ice water. For 38 years, since David was born, Christmas had been our day. Even after his father died 6 years ago, even through my darkest grief, David had insisted we maintain our traditions. The morning coffee together, opening presents by the fireplace, the big dinner with my special cranberry sauce. I understood that things would change when he married Emily. I welcomed those changes. I bought a smaller turkey, learned to make her favorite dishes, rearranged our traditions to include her family. But this felt different. This felt like erasure. David, honey, did I do something wrong? If Emily is upset about something, we can talk about it. His response came too quickly, like he had rehearsed it. No, Mom, nothing like that. We just want to focus on our marriage right now. Maybe we can visit sometime after New Year's. After New Year's. Like I was an obligation to be handled rather than family to be cherished. I tried to keep my voice steady, tried to sound understanding. Of course, sweetheart. I want whatever makes you happy. But after I hung up, I sat in my kitchen surrounded by Christmas preparations that suddenly felt pointless and cried for the first time since Harold's funeral. That night, I called my sister Janet in Florida, needing someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. Something doesn't add up, Janet said after I explained the situation. David has never missed Christmas with you. Even when he was in college and had to work 3 jobs, he came home. This sounds like Emily's idea. I wanted to defend my daughter-in-law, but deep down, I felt the same suspicion. Emily had always been different around me when David wasn't looking. Polite but cold, like she was performing kindness rather than feeling it. The next few days passed in a haze of confusion and hurt. I kept replaying the conversation, wondering what I could have done differently. I had tried so hard to be the mother-in-law I wished I had had, supportive but not intrusive, loving but respectful of boundaries. Then Emily called. Her voice was sickeningly sweet, the tone she used when she wanted something. Margaret, David told me about your conversation. I hope you're not upset. We just think it's time we create our own family traditions. Our own family traditions. As if I wasn't family at all. Of course I understand, dear. I just hope I didn't do anything to make you uncomfortable. There was a pause, and then she said something that made my blood run cold. You know, Margaret, sometimes parents have a hard time letting go. It's natural, but not healthy. Maybe this is exactly what you need to start building your own life instead of depending on David so much. Depending on David. As if loving my son and wanting to spend Christmas with him was some kind of weakness or manipulation. I thanked her for her honesty and hung up, but something in her tone told me this wasn't just about Christmas traditions. This felt bigger, more calculated. That weekend, David called again, his voice strained. "Mom, Emily mentioned you seemed upset about Christmas. I know it's different, but change can be good. Maybe you could volunteer somewhere, meet new people." Meet new people. At 65, after spending 40 years teaching children in this community, after losing my husband and having only my son as close family, he was suggesting I meet new people instead of spending Christmas with him. The hurt was transforming into something else now, something sharper and more aware. The following Tuesday, David asked if they could stop by to pick up some documents from Harold's desk. Emily needed some financial papers for their accountant, something about organizing their investments. I welcomed them warmly, made coffee, set out cookies. Emily was particularly charming that day, complimenting my house, asking about my garden plans for spring. David seemed relaxed, more like himself. After they left, I noticed Emily's phone had fallen between the couch cushions. I found it an hour later while cleaning up the coffee cups. I should have called immediately. I should have driven it over to their house. But something made me hesitate. Maybe it was the way Emily had been acting, or maybe it was pure intuition. Instead, I set the phone on my kitchen counter and stared at it. When it buzzed with a message notification, the screen lit up and I saw something that changed everything. The phone wasn't locked. And the message preview showed Emily texting someone named Lauren. Phase 1 complete. Old lady completely clueless about what's coming. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone. I knew I shouldn't look, knew it was wrong, but that message made my heart pound with dread. I scrolled up to see more of the conversation, and what I found made me sink onto my kitchen stool in shock. Emily, David's being such a baby about cutting her off completely. But once we get through Christmas without her, it'll be easier to make the permanent separation. Lauren, what about the house? Is it really worth that much? Emily, the property alone is worth $400,000. Plus whatever's left from his dad's life insurance. David keeps talking about how mom needs security, but she'll be fine in some little apartment. She's got her teacher's pension. Lauren, and he's actually going along with this? Emily, he doesn't want to, but I keep reminding him that we need to think about our future family. Kids are expensive. His mom had her turn, now it's ours. I scrolled down with shaking fingers, finding more messages from different dates. Emily told David we should start looking at retirement communities for her. She's only 65, but I played up the whole wouldn't she be happier around people her own age angle. Lauren, does she know what you're planning? Emily, are you kidding? She's so desperate to stay in our good graces, she'd probably gift wrap the house for us. The Christmas thing was just the beginning. There were dozens of messages, spanning months. Emily discussing how to gradually isolate me from David, how to make me seem needy and dependent, how to position herself as the reasonable one protecting their marriage from an overbearing mother-in-law. But the worst was yet to come. In a voice message from 3 days ago, Emily had recorded herself talking to Lauren, and I could hear David's voice in the background. Emily, tell her what you just told me, David. David's voice, muffled but clear. I know she means well, but sometimes I feel like I'm married to both of them. Emily's right that mom needs to build her own life. Emily, what did you call her the other day when she called during dinner? David, come on, don't record this. Emily, just say it. David, I said she was becoming a burden. But I didn't mean it like that. Emily, yes, you did. And that's okay. It's normal to feel that way about aging parents. I had to stop the recording. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. My son thought I was a burden. My daughter-in-law was systematically planning to separate me from the only family I had left, and she was manipulating David into believing it was the healthy thing to do. I sat in my kitchen as the winter sun set, holding Emily's phone and feeling something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Not just hurt anymore, but clarity. They thought I was a weak, dependent old woman who could be easily pushed aside. They had no idea who they were actually dealing with. I had spent 40 years managing classroom dynamics, handling manipulative parents, and navigating school politics. I had run the teachers' union for a decade, organized fundraisers that brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars, and successfully fought the school board when they tried to cut arts programs. More importantly, Harold and I had built a substantial nest egg through careful investments and frugal living. I owned my house outright, had a healthy pension, and inherited a significant portfolio when my father died 5 years ago. David knew some of this, but not the full extent. We had always planned to surprise him with how much we could help when he had children of his own. Emily thought she was playing chess with someone who didn't know the rules. She was about to learn that I had been playing this game since before she was born. I spent the next hour going through more of her messages, screenshotting everything. The casual cruelty of her texts, the way she mocked my attempts to bond with her, her detailed plans for convincing David to move me into a retirement community so they could sell my house and use the money for their future children. There were voice messages where she made fun of Harold's accent, imitating the way he used to say certain words before he died. Messages where she called me clingy and pathetic for wanting to spend holidays with my family. But the most damaging content was in her conversations with someone named Jessica, who turned out to be her sister. Emily, you should have seen her face when David told her about Christmas. She looked like a kicked puppy. It was almost sad if she wasn't so annoying. Jessica, isn't this a little cruel? She just lost her husband. Emily, that was 6 years ago. She needs to get over it and stop using David as her emotional support system. Besides, once the house money comes through, we can afford to have kids. Isn't that worth a little temporary guilt? Jessica, what if David changes his mind? Emily, he won't. I've got him convinced that healthy families have boundaries. And if he does waver, it'll just remind him about how his mom tried to control our wedding plans. I remembered the wedding planning. Emily had asked for my input, then dismissed every suggestion I made. When I backed off to give her space, she complained to David that I wasn't being supportive enough. It was my first glimpse of how skillfully she could manipulate situations to make herself the victim. Now I understood it had been a test, a way to create ammunition she could use against me later. I found the conversation from 2 weeks ago that revealed the full scope of their plan. Emily, phase 2 starts after New Year's. We'll visit once a month instead of every week, make it feel natural. Then every other month. By summer, it'll just be major holidays. Jessica, and then what? Emily, by next Christmas, we'll be trying for kids. Perfect excuse to say we need to focus on our own growing family. Then we suggest the retirement community, how much happier she'd be with activities and people her own age. David will feel guilty, but he'll see the logic. Jessica, you're sure the house is worth that much? Emily, the realtor already looked at it when she was at her book club. $400,000 minimum, probably more. Plus she's got Harold's life insurance money just sitting in savings. David says she never spends anything. The realtor had already looked at my house. While I was at book club, trusting them to be in my home, they had been calculating its value like vultures. I screenshotted everything, saved the voice messages, and then made copies on my computer. Then I returned the phone to exactly where Emily had left it and called her. Emily, dear, I found your phone between the couch cushions. Would you like me to drop it off? Her relief was palpable. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I was panicking. Could we pick it up tomorrow morning? Of course. It'll be here. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the bed Harold and I had shared for 35 years, staring at the ceiling and feeling something crystallize inside me. I had 2 choices. I could confront them directly, have a painful family meeting where I would be positioned as the unreasonable one making accusations. Emily would deny everything, David would be forced to choose sides, and I would end up looking exactly like the bitter, paranoid old woman they were already painting me as. Or I could be smarter than that. The next morning, Emily and David arrived together to pick up the phone. Emily was effusive in her gratitude, and David gave me a warm hug. "I'm sorry if I seemed short about Christmas, Mom." Emily helped me understand that we all need to grow and change. I smiled and squeezed his hand. "Of course, sweetheart. I understand completely." And I did understand. I understood exactly what was happening and exactly what I was going to do about it. After they left, I sat down at my computer and began to plan. Emily thought she was dealing with a lonely old woman who would crumble under pressure. She had no idea that I had spent years learning to handle much more sophisticated manipulation from much smarter people. The school board president who tried to embezzle fundraiser money. The parent who forged documents to get her child into advanced classes. The administrator who sexually harassed young teachers and thought his position made him untouchable. I had taken them all down quietly, methodically, and with devastating effectiveness. Emily was about to learn that 40 years of teaching had given me skills she couldn't even imagine. The plan began to form as I reviewed everything I had copied from her phone. I wouldn't confront them directly. I wouldn't even let them know I was aware of their scheme. Instead, I would give them exactly what they wanted while ensuring they paid the full price for their cruelty. I started with research. I spent the next week learning everything I could about Emily's family, her job, her social circle. I had always shown polite interest in her life, but now I was mapping it strategically. Emily worked as a marketing coordinator for a local law firm, a position that required maintaining professional relationships with judges, other attorneys, and court staff. Her reputation mattered enormously for her career advancement. Her sister Jessica was married to a man named Michael who worked for the state treasury office. They had a special needs child who required expensive therapies, making them financially vulnerable. Emily's parents, Robert and Patricia, were respected members of their church and community. Robert served on the city council, and Patricia was president of the Historical Society. Emily valued her image above everything else. She needed to be seen as successful, sophisticated, and morally superior. Her social media was carefully curated to present the perfect life, perfect marriage, perfect values. This gave me multiple pressure points to work with. The beauty of my plan was its simplicity. I wouldn't have to become someone different or compromise my own values. I would simply ensure that Emily's own words and actions had natural consequences. I began with small preparations. I created anonymous email accounts using public computers at the library. I researched the best methods for digital communication that couldn't be traced back to me. More importantly, I started documenting everything they did going forward, building a comprehensive record of their manipulation. When David called to check on me the following week, I was warm and understanding. "I've been thinking about what you said about Christmas, and you're absolutely right. Change is good. In fact, I was wondering if you and Emily might like to come for dinner this Saturday. I have something special I'd like to give her." David sounded relieved and grateful. He had been expecting resistance, maybe tears or guilt trips. My gracious acceptance confused him, which was exactly what I wanted. Saturday evening, I prepared Emily's favorite meal and set the table with my best china. When they arrived, I greeted them with genuine warmth. "Emily, I have something for you. I know how much you love to document special moments, so I put together a little memory book of our time together as a family." I handed her a beautifully wrapped photo album filled with pictures of family gatherings, holidays, and special occasions. Emily flipped through it with appropriate enthusiasm, commenting on how thoughtful it was. What she didn't know was that hidden among the family photos were carefully selected screenshots of her most damaging text messages, printed on photo paper and inserted at strategic intervals. The message about calling me a burden was tucked behind a photo of David's graduation. The conversation about selling my house was placed after pictures of Harold's funeral, where Emily had played the devoted daughter-in-law. I watched her face as she turned the pages, waiting for the moment of recognition. It came when she reached the section with Harold's memorial service photos. Her face went white as she saw her own words printed below a picture of her comforting me at the graveside. The sooner the old lady accepts that David's life has moved on, the easier this will be for everyone. She looked up at me, and I smiled serenely. I thought you might enjoy having those memories to look back on. They really capture the authentic moments, don't you think? Emily's hands were shaking as she closed the album. David was looking between us, sensing tension but not understanding the source. This is very thoughtful, Margaret. Thank you. I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out how I had gotten those screenshots, what else I might know, what I was planning to do with the information. Oh, it's my pleasure, dear. I believe in preserving important communications between family members. You never know when you might want to revisit them. The rest of the evening was exquisite torture for Emily. She couldn't say anything without revealing what she had done, couldn't confront me without admitting her guilt. Meanwhile, I continued to play the loving mother-in-law, discussing recipes and sharing family stories. David left that night convinced that his mother was handling the Christmas situation better than expected. Emily left knowing that her secret war against me had been discovered by the enemy. But I was just getting started. The next phase of my plan required patience and perfect timing. I needed Emily to feel confident that she had weathered the storm, that my photo album had been a warning shot rather than the beginning of a sustained campaign. I let 3 weeks pass without any further contact beyond normal pleasantries. Emily gradually relaxed, probably convincing herself that I was too intimidated to take any real action. During this time, I was anything but idle. I was preparing for what would become known in my family as the Christmas baby shower incident. Jessica had announced her pregnancy in November, and Emily was hosting the baby shower on December 20th, just 5 days before Christmas. Emily had actually invited me to the shower, probably as a way to demonstrate her magnanimity and make herself look like the generous daughter-in-law who included her husband's difficult mother in family celebrations. The invitation came with conditions, of course. I could attend, but I shouldn't bring anything too elaborate or try to make the event about myself. Emily wanted to make sure I understood my place in the family hierarchy. I accepted graciously and offered to bring a small gift and some homemade cookies. What I actually brought was something far more memorable. I spent the weeks leading up to the shower preparing personalized USB drives for each guest. The drives were beautifully wrapped and labeled as digital scrapbooks of Emily's journey to motherhood. Each drive contained carefully organized folders with different types of content for different audiences. For Jessica and her husband Michael, who worked for the State Treasury Office, I included Emily's conversations about hiding assets and her plans to manipulate David into giving her money that should have gone to my estate planning. For Emily's parents, Robert and Patricia, I included the voice messages where Emily mocked Harold's accent and made cruel jokes about my grief after his death. For Emily's work colleagues, I included screenshots of messages where Emily bragged about lying on her timesheet and badmouthed clients behind their backs. For Emily's church friends, I included her conversations about how religion was useful for networking but she thought believers were naive and easily manipulated. The most damaging content went to everyone, complete records of Emily's systematic plan to isolate me from David, including her calculations about my house value and her cruel observations about my emotional state after losing Harold. Each USB drive was customized so that recipients would see content specifically relevant to their relationship with Emily while also getting the full picture of her character. The baby shower was held at the community center where Emily volunteered. About 40 people attended, including family members, work colleagues, church friends, and neighbors. I arrived early, as I always did for family events, carrying a plate of homemade sugar cookies and a small gift bag containing what appeared to be a standard baby gift. Emily was in her element, playing the glowing mother-to-be, graciously accepting gifts and compliments. She was particularly charming with me, making a point of thanking me publicly for coming and making everyone aware of how inclusive she was being. Margaret has been such a wonderful example of family support during this exciting time. I'm so grateful to have her in our lives. The irony was almost too perfect. When it came time for gift opening, I waited until near the end. I wanted maximum audience for what was about to happen. Emily, dear, I have something special for everyone. I know how important it is to you that people remember this wonderful day, so I've prepared digital memory books for all your friends and family. I began handing out the beautifully wrapped USB drives, explaining to each recipient that their drive contained photos and memories specifically chosen for them. The drives were designed to autoplay when inserted into any computer, so I knew that people would likely review the content when they got home that evening. Emily watched with growing unease as I distributed the drives to everyone present. She couldn't object without seeming ungrateful, but she could sense that something wasn't right. Margaret, that's incredibly thoughtful. What kind of memories did you include? Just conversations and moments that really capture who you are as a person, dear. I wanted everyone to see the real Emily behind the public face. I smiled warmly as I handed her parents their drive, then moved on to her work colleagues, her church friends, her neighbors. David was beaming with pride at his mother's thoughtfulness. He had no idea what was actually on those drives, but he was clearly pleased to see me making an effort with Emily's social circle. The shower continued normally for the rest of the afternoon. Emily opened baby gifts, we played traditional shower games, and everyone enjoyed cake and conversation. I left with warm hugs from everyone, accepting their thanks for the thoughtful digital gifts and promising to see everyone soon. That evening, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea and waited for the fireworks to begin. The first call came at 8:30. Emily's voice was shaking with rage. What the hell did you put on those drives? Language, dear. I simply shared some of your own words and thoughts. I thought people should know the real you. You crazy old bitch, I'm going to call the police. This is harassment. I remained calm, which seemed to infuriate her even more. Emily, everything on those drives came directly from your own phone. I didn't create any of that content, I just organized it for people who care about you. I thought they deserved to know what you really think of them. She hung up, probably to call David and try to control the narrative. The second call came an hour later. David's voice was strained and confused. Mom, Emily is saying you recorded her conversations and put them on USB drives you gave out at the baby shower. That doesn't sound like something you would do. I didn't record anything, sweetheart. I simply shared screenshots of text messages and some voice messages that Emily had sent to other people. Everything came from her own phone when she left it at my house. There was a long silence. What kind of messages? The kind where she calls me a burden and discusses how to trick you into moving me to a nursing home so she can sell my house and take the money. The kind where she makes fun of your father's accent and laughs about my grief. The kind where she calls your cousins white trash and says your grandmother was senile. Another long silence. David, honey, I know this is hard to hear. But Emily has been planning to separate you from me for months. She's been manipulating both of us, making me seem clingy and you seem weak. I have all the evidence if you want to see it. I could hear Emily in the background, probably trying to damage control, but her voice sounded shrill and desperate. The third call came the next morning. Jessica, Emily's sister, calling from an unknown number. Margaret, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding about those USB drives. No misunderstanding, Jessica. Emily sent your family some particularly cruel messages about your son's disability. She called him a waste of money and said she was glad her future children wouldn't be defective like yours. I thought Michael should know what his sister-in-law really thinks of his family. The silence stretched so long I wondered if she had hung up. She said those things? She did. And she said much worse. She's been planning to take advantage of my family while simultaneously destroying other people behind their backs. I thought everyone deserved to know who they were really dealing with. By the end of the week, the fallout was more comprehensive than I had dared to hope. Emily's parents had received the drive containing her mockery of their religious beliefs and her contempt for their small-town values. Robert resigned from the city council rather than face questions about his daughter's character. Patricia stopped answering Emily's calls altogether. Emily's work colleagues had learned about her lies regarding billable hours and her cruel comments about clients. Her supervisor called for a formal review, and several clients requested different representation. The church community was horrified by her recorded conversations about using religion for networking and her dismissive comments about their faith. The pastor asked her to step down from the children's ministry. But the most devastating consequences were still to come. Michael, Jessica's husband who worked for the state treasury office, had been particularly disturbed by Emily's casual discussion of hiding assets and manipulating financial documents. He felt obligated to report what appeared to be potential fraud to the appropriate authorities. That report triggered an IRS audit of both Emily and David's finances, which revealed some questionable deductions Emily had claimed in previous years. The audit also uncovered Emily's side consulting business, which she had been running without proper permits and while using her law firm's resources. Meanwhile, David was facing his own reckoning. His colleagues at the accounting firm learned about his willingness to defraud his elderly mother, which raised serious questions about his professional ethics and trustworthiness. Several clients specifically requested different representation when word spread about the family situation. But perhaps the most painful consequence for David was the loss of respect from his extended family. Harold's siblings, who had always considered David their favorite nephew, were horrified by his betrayal of my trust and his father's memory. They began sharing their own stories of David's recent behavior, how he had become distant and dismissive, how he had started making excuses not to attend family gatherings. The picture that emerged was of a man who had gradually isolated himself from everyone who loved him in order to please a manipulative wife. 3 weeks after the baby shower, David showed up at my house alone. His face was haggard, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. "Mom, I need to talk to you." I invited him in, made coffee, and waited. "Emily and I are separating. She's staying with her friend Lauren while we figure things out." "I'm sorry to hear that, honey." He looked at me with something between surprise and gratitude. "Are you? Really?" "Of course I am. I never wanted your marriage to fail, David. I wanted Emily to stop trying to destroy our relationship, but I hoped she would choose to be better rather than lose everything." He started crying then, the kind of deep, wrenching sobs that come when someone finally stops pretending everything is okay. "I read everything, Mom. All the messages, all the recordings. She said terrible things about Dad, about you, about our whole family. And I went along with it because I thought I was being a good husband. You were trying to keep your wife happy. That's not wrong, David. But I hurt you. I called you a burden. I agreed to cut you out of our lives so we could take your money." He was sobbing harder now. "Yes, you did. And that hurt more than anything Emily said about me." I let him cry while I considered my words carefully. "David, your father and I raised you to be loyal and devoted to your family. When you married Emily, she became your family too, and your instinct was to protect and support her. Those are good qualities, even when they're misguided. But Mom, I chose her over you. I chose money over family. And now you're choosing honesty over denial. That takes courage." We talked for hours that day. David told me how gradually Emily had poisoned his perception of me, how she had made every kindness seem like manipulation and every family tradition seem like an obligation. She would point out how you always wanted to help with things and say it was because you didn't trust us to handle our own lives. When you offered to pay for part of our wedding, she said it was because you wanted control over our marriage. Classic manipulation tactics. I had seen them used by parents who wanted to undermine teachers, by administrators who wanted to control staff. Emily had isolated David from his support system by reframing every positive relationship as a threat to their marriage. The most heartbreaking part was learning how Emily had systematically destroyed David's confidence in his own judgment. She made me feel like I was being disloyal to our marriage every time I wanted to spend time with you or talk to you about important decisions. She said that married men who were too close to their mothers never learned to be real husbands. By the time David left that day, we had begun the slow process of rebuilding our relationship. It wouldn't be easy or quick, but we both wanted to try. 2 months later, the divorce was finalized. Emily had tried to claim half of David's inheritance and assets, but the evidence of her fraud and manipulation made that impossible. The IRS audit resulted in significant penalties and back taxes. The state investigation into her business practices led to professional sanctions. Her reputation in the legal community was permanently damaged. Most importantly for her long-term prospects, the baby shower drives had been shared widely enough that her story became local gossip. In a small professional community, reputation is everything, and Emilis was thoroughly destroyed. She moved to another state, ostensibly for a fresh start, but really because staying in town had become professionally and socially impossible. David and I spent Christmas together that year, just the two of us in my living room with my cranberry sauce and his favorite sweater. It wasn't the same as before, but it was honest in a way our relationship had never been. We talked about Harold, about family, about the mistakes we had both made and the lessons we had learned. I don't think I'll ever stop feeling guilty about choosing her over you, David said as we cleaned up dinner dishes. Good, I replied. That guilt will help you make better choices in the future. He looked surprised, and then he laughed. It was the first genuine laugh I had heard from him in over a year. You know, Emily always said you were manipulative and controlling. She was wrong about a lot of things, but maybe she had a point about that one. I smiled as I put away the last plate. Sweetheart, I'm a retired teacher who spent 40 years managing teenage drama and helicopter parents. Of course I'm manipulative when I need to be. The difference is that I use my powers for good. David moved back into his old room for a few months while he rebuilt his life and his confidence. It was good for both of us, a chance to remember what we had always loved about each other. He met someone new eventually, a kind woman named Sarah who worked as a nurse and genuinely enjoyed family gatherings. She and I liked each other immediately, bonding over our shared love of David and our mutual intolerance for drama. When they got engaged, Sarah asked if I would help plan the wedding. It was a simple request, but it meant everything to me. Emily sent a card when she heard about David's engagement. Inside, she had written, I hope you're happy now. I was, actually. Not because I had destroyed her life, but because I had saved my son from someone who was systematically destroying his capacity for genuine love and trust. Emily had taught me something important about myself. I had always prided myself on being kind and gentle, on avoiding conflict whenever possible. But kindness without strength is just weakness in disguise. Sometimes love requires you to fight for the people you care about, even when fighting goes against your nature. I never regretted giving out those USB drives. Emily had shown me who she really was through her own words and actions. All I had done was make sure other people could see it too. The truth is a powerful weapon when wielded properly. It doesn't require you to become cruel or dishonest. It just requires you to stop protecting people from the consequences of their own choices. Emily had gambled everything on the assumption that I was too weak, too naive, and too dependent to fight back effectively. She learned that underestimating a retired teacher who has spent decades dealing with manipulative behavior is a mistake you only make once. I kept copies of all Emilis messages, not as trophies, but as reminders. They help me remember that sometimes the people who seem the most charming and reasonable are actually the most dangerous. They also remind me that family isn't just about blood or marriage. It's about people who choose to love and support each other honestly, even when it's difficult. David and Sarah have been married for 3 years now, and they're expecting their first child this spring. I'm excited to become a grandmother, but more importantly, I'm grateful that my future grandchild will grow up in a home filled with genuine love and honest communication. Emily never had her baby. The stress of the divorce and the financial difficulties led to complications that ended her pregnancy. I felt genuinely sorry for that loss, despite everything she had done. But I never doubted that I had done the right thing in exposing her manipulation and protecting my family from further harm. People sometimes ask me if I would handle things differently if I could do it again. The answer is no. I would give out those USB drives again tomorrow if it meant protecting someone I loved from systematic emotional abuse and financial manipulation. The only thing I might change is the timing. I probably should have acted sooner, before Emily had so much time to damage David's confidence and isolate him from his support system. But then again, acting too quickly might not have been as effective. Emily needed enough time to create a comprehensive record of her own cruel intentions. She needed enough rope to hang herself with. The beauty of my revenge was its simplicity and its justice. I didn't have to become someone I wasn't or do anything I couldn't live with. I simply made sure that Emily faced the natural consequences of her own choices and behavior. I turned her own words into the weapon that destroyed her credibility and her relationships. She had planned to isolate me from my family and take everything I had worked for. Instead, she isolated herself and lost everything she had tried to gain. That's not revenge, really. That's just karma with a little assistance. The last I heard, Emily was working as a paralegal in a different state, living in a small apartment and struggling to rebuild her professional reputation. David occasionally gets updates through mutual acquaintances, and he sometimes feels guilty about how completely her life fell apart. But I remind him that Emily made her own choices. She chose to be cruel, manipulative, and dishonest. She chose to target a grieving widow and try to steal from her family. The consequences of those choices weren't imposed by me. They were the natural result of her own actions when brought into the light. I sleep peacefully every night, knowing that I protected my family and myself from someone who was systematically trying to destroy us. And every Christmas morning, when David and Sarah and I exchange gifts by my fireplace while my granddaughter plays with her toys, I remember what I almost lost and feel grateful for what I was strong enough to save. Emily thought she was playing chess with an amateur. She discovered that some opponents have been studying the game longer than you know, and underestimating them is the fastest way to lose everything you value. My daughter-in-law banned me from Christmas, and my son agreed. They thought they could break me, isolate me, and steal from me with impunity. Instead, I gave them the perfect payback without changing who I was or compromising my values. I simply made sure the truth about their character became impossible to ignore. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people face the consequences of their own actions. And sometimes, if you're lucky, those consequences come wrapped in pretty packages at baby showers, distributed with a smile and a grandmother's love for justice.